I wasn't planning on my video being about what today's topic is going to be, and ironically, it has to do with basically the comments that happened in my last video. My last video was about saving Social Security and health care, and talking about how billionaires saved how they are killing the mail on purpose, to put more money into their pockets. And I got one guy got on there and immediately called me a lib, called me wrinkly. I think he's talking about my chin here, from being wrinkly, and the insinuation being that I'm a quote unquote libtard, which is the typical name calling that happens from the right when they know that they are out educated and out informed by the people they're mocking. So they just throw name calling at the people to try to do it, to try to, I don't know what they're hoping to accomplish, because they're not going to convince me by calling me names or anything. But he ignored all of that, all of what the video was about, and went just wild on wild, crazy stuff. Um, he went into Trump and Obama and Biden, and I never mentioned Biden in my video at all. Uh, Obama I brought up simply because of the Affordable Health Care Act, and I spoke about that. But this guy said that Obama snuck the Affordable Health Care Act through Congress on Christmas Eve. And then he says right on, he literally says he has a great memory. This 21-year-old guy who called me bruh, by the way. So anyway, he's claiming that it was snuck through, and it doesn't take a lot of research to know that it was actually passed on March 10th, 2010, and it was passed with both Republican and Democrats on it, and it wasn't as strong of a package as Democrats wanted, because they negotiated with the Republicans and they gave the Republicans some of what they wanted on it. So it's not the perfect plan. It could have been a lot better, but the Republicans kept it from being better. And Trump actually tried to eliminate the plan, which saved tens of millions of people, made it possible for them to have health insurance. So the whole Affordable Health Care Act is very good, but it could be better. I know I'm not going to say it's the perfect one. It could have been better if the Republicans didn't knock it down to something less than what it could have been. But anyway, he went on to call me a Democrat, and I mean here he's making guesses about things. He has no idea who I am or anything about me, so he doesn't know if I'm a Democrat or a Republican. And then he goes on to say that the Democrats were went after slaves. They were with the KKK. So he's trying to make all these points, and I tried being polite with him, and I responded back, so you are right. The Democrats were, in fact, the party of the KKK back in the 1800s and early 1900s. But when Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, he said to his assistant, "We're going to lose the South." He was a Democrat, and he said, "We're going to lose the South now because of this." For a very long time, and he was totally right. The South, which was totally Democrat, until 1964, rapidly turned into totally Republican. If you look at it now, Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, they're all heavily Republican now, because Republicans swooped in and they got into the religious right and racism, and those things worked for them. So they did take over the South. So when he says that the Democrats were the party of the KKK, not the current ones, the ones from the past, that's like trying to blame cavemen on something that happened, 5,000 years later. It's not accurate. But to call me a Democrat too, without knowing anything about me, and I actually brought it up, and I tried responding again civilly to what he was saying, and he just doesn't want to learn. I was a big Nixon fan, and a lot of people, all they know about Nixon is Watergate. and they don't know the many good things that he did when he was president. He created the EPA. He instituted that. He was very much into civil rights, and improved food stamps and living what the high raised the cost of living adjustments to Social Security people, affirmative action for minorities for construction. This was all done by Nixon, and he was a person who he started détente with Russia. He was the first president to make friends with China after 21 years of us not being totally against each other on things. He and Kissinger got a lot done. But the only and then here's even the crazier thing. He was reelected with 47 million votes versus 29 million votes for the person he was running against. And get this, the electoral college, 520 to 17. That's how hugely he won re-election when he was put in there. And and I knew a lot about Nixon. I mean, I read his books, Six Crises. I read the memoir that he did before he died. He's well written. And unlike Trump, he wrote his own books. He wrote that book. He wrote both of those books, and he's very educated. He's very intelligent. But I'm not going to say that he was right on the right side of God when it came to his actions. He did a number of things that were wrong too. But he pulled us out of Vietnam War. That went on for 17 years, I think. And he got rid of the draft, that same draft that Trump voided with his fake bone spurs. Nixon got rid of that, and that was in 1973. I was just a couple years away from being old enough to be drafted, so I remember it quite well. But he stopped all that. Nixon was actually an awesome president. He just should not have been spying on the Democrats. He didn't need to spy on them. He kicked their butts, in the election. Why did he even bother spying on them? It just made no sense to it at all. And then when he was gone, I voted for Ford. I voted for Bush Sr. when he was running against Reagan, because Bush Sr. quite accurately said that trickle-down economics was voodoo economics. So just by making the rich richer, you're not going to help you're not going to help the people, down on the bottom. You give a billionaire money, he's going to go buy something over across the sea, or he's going to buy a yacht, or he's going to buy something it's not going to come back to us on things. And Trump, on the other hand, is a joke, but he's also a menace. I would actually be amused by him, by the weird things he says and his whole moving his arms like this when he talks, and the lies and the lies and the lies and the lies and the lies. I would actually be amused by all of that stuff if it wasn't so alarming about what it's doing to us, because people believe his lies. He says he lies over and over again, and there's the saying that if you say something, a lie long enough, people will believe it. And he does the same lies over and over and over again. When you look at the menace that he is to us now, he's weaponizing U.S. forces to attack citizens, to go into United States cities with the United States government, United States Army, and against the wishes of the governors of those respective states. And he's going in there and basically invading them. He cut off funding to any blue states that disagreed with him, including California during the wildfires. They needed federal assistance, and he goes, well, they didn't vote for me, so I'm not going to give them federal assistance. What the heck is that? He tried to repeal the Affordable Health Care Act. It got within one vote. If it wasn't for McCain, he would have gotten his way, and millions of people, tens of millions of people, would have lost their health coverage, and they wouldn't be able to have it right now. And me being a paraplegic, I would lose the protection that I have from a pre-existing illness. So if I try to get an insurance policy on something, they can't use my pre-existing illness to stop me, and that's because of the Affordable Health Care Act. Get rid of that, and then go, we're not going to give you any insurance, so they could do that. He's destroying public education on purpose. Where are poor people going to go to school if they can't afford to pay for school? Where are they going to go? How are they going to do that? Climate change. He's gotten rid of all the protection against climate change. You know, there's so many tornadoes and hurricanes and everything going on right now. How can you deny climate change? Then he the whole thing with vaccines. He got on board a little bit with that, but he actually thought we could inject bleach into ourselves to. My dog knows not to put bleach inside of somebody, but this guy here didn't know it. And where's that border wall? He kept talking about a border wall and saying Mexico is going to pay for it. I think Mexico hasn't put a penny into that yet on things. He attacks the freedom of the press. He's attacking attorney firms. Anyone that ever took a position against him, he's attacking them. He's making it they can't have federal access that they should have. Any opponent, just because they're an opponent doesn't mean they shouldn't have access to things. And then even things like, hesitating to say this, but the Charlie Kirk death, which I've said before, was a horrible thing. It should not have happened. I'm not for guns at all, and I'm not for people being shot by guns, but I don't think this is somebody that represents the United States. I mean, he was a misogynist. He was a racist. If you're going to honor people that died from gun violence, make it to school, the kids that died in schools, and that died in churches. We're having more than one gun violence attack per day. We're averaging more than one per day. So far this year. But the other part is I just don't think that Trump is smart enough for some of the things that he's doing. I do honestly believe that Project 2025 is real, and it's real people that have a lot, and they see him as a wonderful tool. I mean, he is a tool. You can't deny that. So he's a good tool for them to accomplish the things that they want, to try to bring us back to the jungle. And read The Jungle. Learn what that was like when a corporation, owned the city, or they would own like a whole area. They would force the people who worked for them to live in buildings that they owned. They would pay them in money that they made. That money could only be spent at stores that they own. That's what was in Chicago, back in the meatpacking days. And when Upton Sinclair wrote that book, we should learn by that. That's what billionaires want. They want to get back to that, where they own everything and we don't get anything ourselves. We're just simply their slaves. That's what they want. But then go back to Trump. This guy that was trolling me, talking about how good Trump is, how he represents everybody. Here's a guy. He was a rapist. Trump. He was a pedophile's best friend. There are multiple pictures of Trump with little girls. He went into a teen beauty contest to see them naked, and said that he could because he was the person that owned the contest. He cheated on 3 wives, once with a porn star, while his wife was pregnant. He sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll. He had a fake school, Trump University. He had to pay back like $23 million for that. He cheated on his taxes by saying to borrow money from the bank, he would say his property was worth more than it was, but then when it came to taxes, he would say it's worth less than that. So he was cheating on his taxes. Why is he not in jail for that? He forced Arabs to stay in his hotel to visit him when he was president. He overbilled Secret Service agents to stay at Mar-a-Lago. So he made extra money on Secret Service going out there. He mocked Biden and Obama for their golf, but now he plays more golf than them combined, and we spend millions and hundreds of millions of dollars for Trump to golf. And he cheats at golf too. He pardoned the treasonous, who assaulted our Capitol. He stole confidential documents and took them back to Mar-a-Lago with him, and then he hid them in a bathroom where people could see it very easily. And he also had other secret documents. He flushed them down toilets, and the toilets would not flush all the way, so the documents were available. He called armed forces suckers and losers if they were captured. But yet, he had his bone spurs. I mean, and I get tired of seeing him salute all the time at things, because here's a guy that avoided the armed services, like the world, and whenever you see him at anything, he's saluting. What the heck is that all about? And he lies and he lies and he lies, and almost every lie that he tells, and this is the interesting thing, is something, and that's what this guy, who was watching my YouTube video, and maybe he's going to watch this. He claims he's going to watch them, and he's it's projection. Anything he anything Trump says about somebody else is really because that's something he did. Rigged elections, for example. He's the one that called, trying to find votes. He's the one that's trying to get Texas to make it so that they create more votes for him. The rigging election. He keeps saying it because he keeps doing it. They're the ones that are creating most of that issue. So his best way of dealing with it is to keep saying somebody else is doing it, and then his MAGA followers go, "Oh, that must be true because he said that." And I don't know. He just, he says he's going to make the government so much better. The people who are for Republicans, and again, I've given you my Republican background, and I can tell you this about Republicans as somebody who's lived through it, and I know it, that Republicans, the national debt under Republican presidents goes up. The national debt under Democratic presidents goes down. Look it up. I'm not making this up. It's not something weird you're hearing on the internet. Very easy to look it up. The national debt goes up under Republicans, down under Democrats. And it's just something that I think people need to know, these kind of things here. And I was inspired to do for that guy who got on my tube video, and was mocking me and mocking my wrinkles and things like that, and telling me that I'm not smart. And then he was trying to tell me about bankruptcies not being bad. And I teach bankruptcies. I teach mechanic lien law. I teach construction law. I've written books on it. I've done seminars. I do a monthly business column that won a national award on business. So I know bankruptcies. So if you want to talk to me about the difference between a 7 and a 13 and 11 and a 9 and a chapter 22, you know what a chapter 22 is, dude? No, you don't know, because there is no such thing as a chapter 22. It's when somebody files 2 chapter 11s in a row. What you can do with a chapter 11, you can't do it with a chapter 7. So, dude, I know bankruptcies, so don't tell me that I don't know bankruptcies and I don't know things. So, yeah, I'm a little pissed at you, dude. Brah, if that's what you want to call people. So, anyway, this bra said he's going to get back onto my video and watch my next one and tear it apart piece by piece. Give it a try, dude. Give it a try, because you're 21 years old, you're insecure, you're not educated, you're probably MAGA, you probably have a red hat somewhere that was made in China, not by anywhere in the United States. So go ahead, try to bring me down to your level. You're just not going to do it. You're just going to give me some fun to mock you right here, dude, brah. Bye. All right. My website, www.normcowie.com, COWIE. Take care, everybody.